That's why I was like, why are you so more aggressive?
Yeah, Chicago loosely translates to land of the strong, smelly onions. Chicago pride. That slowly makes its way to the lake, and then in the fall, they'll reverse that process. The first one I want to point out is to our left. Look past those yellow cranes. Set back there, you're going to see a thick, white column-shaped building with these black vertical lines. That's the Aon Center. Third tallest building here in the city at over 1,100 feet. Originally opened up in the early 70s, has a few different names: Standard Oil Building, Amoco Building. Now to our left, you might notice this two-level roadway. Wacker Drive is going to be with us through most of the tour, named for the commissioner of the first plane of Chicago. They started building Wacker Drive in the 20s, and it was considered to be the first two-level roadway in the world. The idea was that the upper level was for car and pedestrian traffic. The lower level, trucks, through traffic, trash pickup, deliveries, kind of the less glamorous parts of urban life. Also, Lower Wacker Drive became a great place to film movie car chases. Blues Brothers, Dark Knight, just to name a couple. If you're curious, under construction here, ladies and gentlemen, that is our brand new Apple Store. Ooh, should be pretty lovely, and that's its height, so it's not going to block too much of the view. Let's go farther into our past. We have the building with the clock tower, the Wrigley. Now the Wrigley building, technically two structures. You'll notice that gap in the middle. It was completed between 1921 and 1924. Each side is connected by a couple of walkways. And the clock tower itself was modeled after the Jaude Cathedral in Seville, Spain. So we call this a span. I wanted to mention about the architect of the Trump Tower, Adrian Smith. Now he's another Chicago architect, but he is known for buildings worldwide. His most famous design, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, tallest building in the world right now. He is also the lead designer on the new Jeddah Tower in Saudi Arabia. When completed, should be the new tallest building in the world. So we don't have the tallest building here, and these two spiral towers to our right, collectively known as Marina City, affectionately referred to as the Corncob Towers. These were completed in 1964, designed by the architect Bertrand Goldberg. Now, Goldberg loved to use nature as his inspiration. And one of his famous quotes, when this started as a warehouse in the 19-teens, nice and even, 6 on either side. And then they were expanding LaSalle Street here ahead of us, and they actually cut off part of that building. Yeah, to me that is a perfect example of Chicago progress. Especially early 20th century. Nothing got in its way. Not even your warehouse. Let's go ahead and let's trim it off the side there. Now obviously that's not a warehouse anymore. They got restaurants in there, office space. That is known as adaptive reuse. When you take an old structure, update it for more modern needs. In fact, we see another great example of that just to our right. This red and gray brick building started out as a coffee warehouse in the 19-teens. And then in the 1980s, they gutted and remodeled the interior, added those glass office penthouses up top. That is where you'll find the DIRTT design firm. It stands for Doing It Right This Time. Yeah, they specialize in environmentally friendly interior designs. But here to our right, coming into view, is a massive structure, the Merchandise Mart. Now, when this opened in 1930, it was the largest building in the world. Has over 4 million square feet of space, takes up 2 entire city blocks, and at one point, needed its own postal code. Now, originally it was a wholesale facility for Marshall Fields, big retail. Right now I want to focus on this one in front of us with a curved top and bottom, the new Riverboat office tower. Brand new, 50-plus story office building with a 1.5-acre public plaza in front of it. Notice that that plaza is elevated. There's those white walls in front of us. That's because train lines are passing underneath it. So the plaza walls actually have fans in them to vent. In front of us, we got that raised railroad bridge that's from 1908. Now back then, we had all these different factories and warehouses in this area, so they needed a freight line running across the river. And then by 2000, most of those had shut down. So that's when the bridge was retired. It eventually became a landmark. It's always in that upright position, except for once a year. It's lowered, essentially so they can inspect it, and Union Pacific has to run something across it to maintain their rights to it. To our left here, we got this pinkish building that has about half a paint job done on it right now. This is the oldest building I point out on the tour. Originally built in 1898. It was a large warehouse. Eventually it became a cold storage warehouse. And then in the 1980s, well, they turned it into a residential building. That was not easy. First of all, they had to remove tons of horsehair insulation from the walls. And then they had to add all of those balconies and the majority of the windows into these very thick walls. Over the last few years, they've been doing some pretty major structural repair to it. And luckily, they're pretty much nearing the completion now since they've started to put on the new paint job. Keep looking to the left here, you see these very unique gray townhomes, the River Cottages. Notice the porthole-shaped windows, triangular sail-shaped roofs. The architect, Harry Weiss, when he designed these in the 1980s, very much ahead of his time. Not only did he embrace the river with these nautical themes, but he embraced the river simply by facing the buildings towards it. That was not common back then, especially with residences. Sit on this waterway that bridges the Great Lakes and the Gulf. In fact, it was in anticipation of that waterway being completed that Chicago was founded. 1837, we were founded as a city. And 1848 was when the Illinois and Michigan Canal opened for business. So we became a booming port city. That was also the first year that we got any train lines, so those kept expanding east and west. We really became a crossroads of America by river and rail. And our population really ballooned from about 3,000 people in 1837 to over 2 million by 1900. Nowadays, if you're curious, we got about 2.8 million in the city itself. So that's kind of a quick little overview of Chicago growth. Right now, I want to get back to architecture because I'm sure you are extremely curious about this very unique building here to our right, standing on that incredibly small base. This is the new 150 North Riverside office tower. Now, first of all, how is it standing up? Well, where you see the V shape in the building, there's actually steel girders inside of there. They're helping to funnel the weight from above to the supports in the middle. But I'm sure you are also curious, why? Why did they design it this way? Well, you see, nowadays when you build along the river, your buildings have to actually be at least 30 feet back from the water's edge at their base. That's to create a more inviting space along the river. Whereas the far side of this building, you have train lines running over there, so instead of building right on top of them with the main structure, they're capping it with the public plaza. So it's really location, location, location. Black and gray granite building, the Boeing corporate headquarters. And the train lines that run to the west of the new 150 North Riverside building actually run directly underneath the Boeing building. So this is a great example of something called air rights. And what that means in Chicago, well, the train companies had built their tracks on what would become prime commercial real estate. So how can they make some extra money off of that? Well, they realized that they could sell the air above their tracks. That's right, the Boeing building literally has a 99-year lease on the air that it occupies. Now that creates problems when you're building those buildings. The Boeing building uses a specialized truss system. We don't really see it going in this direction, but when we come back upriver, if you take a look, one side of the building is held up by these steel girders. It's almost as if it's floating above parts of the train tracks. Whereas here to the right, we have the very first example of air rights here in the city. The Art Deco LaSalle Wacker, or sorry, not LaSalle Wacker building, Daily News building was its original name. So you'll see the uninterrupted lines in the windows, the different setbacks. However, one of the reasons this building is set so far back from the river, they actually took the main weight of the structure off of the train tracks. So they pass underneath that plaza in front. Now in terms of big picture art, 66. Yeah, the famous roadway connecting us all the way to California runs along Adams Street in that direction. In fact, if you're over at Adams in Michigan, you'll find the sign that begins Route 66. Right now, let's take a look here to our right. You'll see this low-lying building with these big old black X. Very large Art Deco building undergoing a big renovation right now. This is the old main post office. So let's talk about its history first. This was completed in the early 1930s, designed by Graham Anderson Probst and White, the largest post office in the world back then. In fact, just to emphasize how big it is, realize that this 8-lane highway we're about to pass underneath goes right through the center of the building. However, when the post office was completed, Congress Parkway here did not exist. But they knew it was coming, so they actually designed the building with a gap in the center. Now that is how you properly prepare for Chicago progress. Just have that hole waiting for the roadway. Now, one of the reasons that we needed a post office that large back then, we were the mail order capital of America. And Montgomery Ward, who basically invented mail order catalogs. Sears and Roebuck, the biggest rivals, would eventually overtake them. They were shipping their magazines cross-country, really changing the country. You know, suddenly you could order these, they called them city goods, from the comfort of your own home and have them delivered. That was really big. Or so to our southwest is where you would have found Mrs. O'Leary's barn. And it was in early October of 1871 in that barn that apparently Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern, set the city ablaze. There's more to it than that, though. So at that time, we were in the middle of a drought. Conditions very dry. Also, Chicago, 1871, mostly made of wood. Combine that with a strong wind blowing, it created kind of a recipe for disaster. And this fire spread. It would jump the south branch of the river, burn east and north, jump the main branch, end up burning for about 30 hours. Taking with it over 3 square miles of the city, all the way up to Fullerton Avenue. And it began, if you look to our right, in the distance, you'll see a low-lying radio tower. It's red and white back there. That is where we believe the fire began, in that general area. Now, plus you got the concrete tower rising up with the green-gray cylinders on top. 311 South Wacker Drive. That building also has a few different nicknames, including the Birthday Cake Building, or my personal favorite, the White Castle. Now that name makes even more sense at night because that central cylinder up there is usually lit up very brightly, very whitely. In fact, when they first turned on the lights on that building in the early 90s, they soon realized it was affecting the migratory patterns of birds. Yeah, apparently they were mistaking it for the moon, getting confused, flying the wrong way, including directly into the building. Yeah, that's no good. So nowadays, during times of migration, the light will be dimmed or not turned on at all. Also, for different awareness, the Willis Tower. And when this premiered in 1974, it was the tallest building in the world. Stands at 1,451 feet, 110 stories. And it would be the tallest in the world for about 2.5 decades. Nowadays, has fallen outside the top 10. Oh, by the way, the 2 antennas on top do not count for its official height. Those are radio and television towers that were added after the building had already been open for a number of years. So they're coming back into view here, or Willis Tower, black aluminum facade, over 16,000 windows. If you're looking all the way up to the top, you might notice those 4 glass boxes coming out the west side. That is the ledge. And yes, there are people in there. Has anyone been to the Mercantile Exchange? Big trading organization. We used to have a trading floor right in the center of this building. Now, once again, you don't want support columns running down the center of your trading floor, so they use something special to support the roof above that floor. They actually designed the 2 towers on the either side slightly curved outwards to take the weight of the roof. However, when they moved everything into the 2 buildings, the weight of that helped to straighten the towers out. It was all by design. So they say, in theory, empty everything out of the two buildings, whoop, go right back outwards again. It's a very unique engineering trick. Like I said, once again necessitated by a trading floor. However, the majority of trading floors in Chicago, well, they're not open anymore. It's all gone electronic. So there's still a few at the Board of Trade. You got the Art Deco elements. You also have some Beaux-Arts flourishes like theatrical masks. You might notice those. Also, if you're looking at the wording, no, it is not pronounced Civic Opera Pavilion. They're using the Roman alphabet. That is apparently the more traditional U. And if you really crane your neck, you might get a sense of this building's throne-like shape. And there's some great stories attached to that. So that building was paid for by a wealthy energy baron named Samuel Insull. And the story goes that his wife, a performer, had been rejected by the Metropolitan Opera in New York. So to make her happy, he built her own giant opera house. Had it shaped like a throne so that she could in spirit sit upon her throne with her back turned toward New York City. The first L line in Chicago was built back around 1893 when we were hosting our first World's Fair, the World's Columbia Exposition. Expanded over the years. There's over 200 miles of mass transit rail. A lot is elevated. We're known for the area downtown, the Loop, where the trains loop around our business district. There's also portions that become subways as well. Oh, here to our right, a lot of history's taken place here. Not in this building, but in what's come before. In 1860, there was a convention hall here. That is where Abraham Lincoln was nominated to run for president. Go back even further, in 1833, there was a tavern in a hotel. That is where the leaders of this small settlement got together and officially founded the town of Chicago. So yes, if you were listening closely, Chicago technically founded in a bar. Seems fitting. The floor of that building housed a speakeasy that may have been connected to Al Capone. So maybe it wasn't the safest building in the city. Or maybe it was. I guess it depends on who you're working for.